Hi everyone, my name is Suzanne and I'm a Chinese metaphysics master in Hong Kong. Today I want to talk about a concept in Feng Shui that is not very well understood and also sounds a little bit scary, and that's the concept of the death and emptiness lines. Now, the name itself is a little bit frightening, but you don't have to worry. As usual, when it comes to these sort of terminologies, um, death and emptiness does not mean actual death. It just means that the energies are either overly strong or they are void. We can't really tap into them. So it doesn't mean that anybody is going to die. So that's first thing I want to put out there. Now, in order to understand the concept of death and emptiness lines, I assume that you know how to measure the facing of a property, right? So I'm not going to go into this. This is a little bit of an advanced topic for those who understand Feng Shui or have at least the basic concepts down of Feng Shui. So this has to do with the facing direction of a property and what happens when it faces a death and emptiness line. So we're not concerned with the facing of your bed or the facing of your door or the facing of your stove or your balcony or your work desk. This is the facing of the property, the facing of the building you're living in, right? And when it faces a death and emptiness line, then we can probably expect certain obstacles coming our way. Now, there are three different types of death and emptiness lines. There are cardinal death and emptiness lines, major death and emptiness lines, and minor death and emptiness lines. Now, the minor ones, I'm not even really that worried about. The major ones, they create some difficulties, but they're not that overly negative. The cardinal death and emptiness lines are really the ones that we want to avoid. Now, the cardinal death and emptiness lines, there's basically four of them. And this happens when your property is facing either 0 degree, 90 degree, 180 degree, or 270 degree precisely. Yeah. So if your property, let's say, is facing 0.5 degrees, then this is not a cardinal death and emptiness line facing. So it has to be precisely facing due 0 degree, due 90 degree, due 180 degree, or due 270 degree. Then the property is facing a cardinal death and emptiness line. So to show you this on this chart here, so if the property is facing 0 degree, then it's facing due north. If it's facing 90 degree, it's facing due east. If it's facing 180 degree, it's facing due south. And if it's facing 270 degrees, it's facing due west. So really, even if there's just a deviation of 0.2 or 3 degrees, this is not considered a cardinal death and emptiness line. So it has to be precisely on this line. Now, if a property is facing these cardinal death and emptiness lines, then the energies that the property receives are way too strong for residential or even commercial purposes. Now, they are very good for spiritual purposes, for religious purposes, and that's why you see a lot of spiritual places in the world having an alignment on these lines. For example, the pyramids, Stonehenge, all the sacred, especially the ancient sacred sites, they are aligned towards these degree lines. And this is because for spiritual places, we want to tap into very strong energies. But nobody lives in these places. Yeah, the energies are too strong. They help us meditate, they help us manifest, they help us pray, they help us connect with the higher self, but they're really not suitable for residential purposes. Yeah, they're too strong and they make us too agitated. So if you find a property facing towards one of these cardinal death and emptiness lines, and let's say you have the option to move in there or not, before you even moved in there, It's not a good place to move in there. Not because it's damaging, but you will never feel settled. You will always feel anxious. Yeah, you feel troubled. If you expose yourself too much to these strong energies over a long period of time, you will not thrive. Again, in spiritual places, people usually don't live there. Yeah, you go to a temple for a certain period of time to pray, and then you leave. And that is perfectly fine, but people usually don't live there. So cardinal death and emptiness lines, they are anyway extremely rare when it comes to residential or commercial properties. And if you measure a property having or facing towards a cardinal death and emptiness line, I would say don't move in there, because no matter whatever else you do inside from a feng shui perspective, it's not really going to work. Yeah, it's not really going to affect you. The energies are way too strong. Now, beginners very often end up measuring these cardinal death and emptiness lines. So, if you happen to come across a building that is supposedly facing a cardinal death and emptiness line, then what you do is take 2 steps forward and measure again. And then maybe take 3 steps back and measure again. Take 3 measurements of the facing, yeah, from 3 different positions, but still on the same sort of like facing line. Only if 3 times you measure exactly the same degree, let's say 0 degree, then it's a true cardinal death and emptiness line. And again, I'm assuming here that I'm talking to people who know how to measure the facing of a property. So this is a bit of an advanced topic. Then it's a true cardinal death and emptiness line. If you measure 0 degree and then you take 2 steps forward and then suddenly it's 4 degrees, then for sure it's not a cardinal death and emptiness line. There may just be a little bit of a distortion due to steel reinforced concrete or environmental factors, right? So you really have to be careful, measure this 3 times in order to make sure that it truly is a cardinal death and emptiness line. All right. Now, the next one are the major death and emptiness lines. Now, the major death and emptiness lines are not nearly as worrisome as the cardinal death and emptiness lines. And they happen when the facing of a property is just between the major directions. So for example, you measure here on this line, it's just between Southwest 3 and West 1. Yeah, and it's this precise line. And so it's difficult to determine then, well, is this a West 1 facing building or a Southwest 3 facing building, right? So it makes it very, very difficult. But it has to be precisely on these lines here, right? Or on these degree ranges. So there's only 8 of those because we have 8 major directions. And when it falls on a major death and emptiness line, then it becomes very difficult to use either Bajai, 8 mansions, or flying stars, because the moment you're not sure what facing direction you're actually measuring, you can't determine the house qua. And you cannot determine the flying stars chart, the natal chart. You can still work with the annual stars. You can still work with life qua principles, but the house qua will be impossible to determine, and the flying stars natal chart as well. Now, what are these points exactly? So let's have a look here. So let's say you measure out here, and it's just between South 1 and Southeast 3, right? So South 1 is here and Southeast 3 is here. So as you can see, they share this point, 157 degree, 0.5 degree. 157.5 degree. So if the property is facing or falling directly onto this facing line, 157.5 degrees, then the property is facing a major death and emptiness line. Right? And this is basically just annoying because the T is confused. It doesn't know, does it belong to the south or does it belong to the southeast, right? Same, for example, if we look at southeast 1 and east 3, where do we have it? Southeast 1 is here and east 3. So there, the common point or the cutoff point is 112.5 degrees, right? So if the house is facing 112.5 degrees, again, it's falling or is facing a major death and emptiness line. And then the Qi is confused. The house does not know, or the property doesn't know whether it receives southeast energies or east energies. And again, this makes it impossible to determine the house square and the natal flying stars charts. Again, you can still work with the annual stars. That is not a problem. You can still work with live Gua, but it's just a very annoying sort of, it's just a very annoying property. And you sort of like have distorted qi flow within the property or coming towards the property. So that's just annoying from a calculation basis. And then lastly, we've got the minor death and emptiness lines. Now, the minor death and emptiness lines, again, they're minor, right? So the annoyance level is minor, and they happen only within the major directions, within the major cardinal, within the major 8 directions. And they are also only between the 24 mountains. So let's have a look at the southeast here. Yeah, the southeast, the minor death and emptiness lines in the southeast happen between southeast 1 and southeast 2, and southeast 2 and southeast 3. Again, if you're measuring out here and you cannot determine whether the property is facing southeast 2 or southeast 3, then it becomes difficult to plot a chart. In some cases, you can still plot the flying stars chart, because the flying stars chart for properties that are facing subdirection 2 and subdirection 3 are the same. So there you can still plot the flying stars chart. However, if your house is facing facing this one here, between southeast 1 and southeast 2, then you cannot plot the natal flying stars chart. However, you can plot the house square. Yeah, you can plot the Bajai chart, because either way the house is facing southeast, right? And so therefore it's sitting now northwest, so it would be a Qiangua house. You just don't quite know about the flying stars chart. So these are minor death and emptiness lines. They're not very they're not all that annoying. And again, they happen, all of these measurements, all of these facing measurements, they happen very rarely, because again, you need a precise degree range. So if we are taking that example again of southeast 2 and southeast 2, southeast 3. So here we've got southeast 2, here we've got southeast 3. So again, the cutoff point here is 142.5 degrees. And so if the house is facing precisely on this degree line, then it's facing a minor death and emptiness line. You don't know, is it facing southeast 2 or southeast 3? Now, in a case like this, again, not that detrimental, because any subdirection 2, subdirection 3 facing, they share the same flying stars chart. But if it were between southeast 1 and southeast 2, then you'd have a problem. You wouldn't be able to plot the flying stars natal chart. Again, annual chart, not a problem. House square, not a problem, right? So this is why, generally speaking, we do not like properties that are facing a death and emptiness line. It's not that, again, anybody is getting is dying or getting sick, but the energies are just a little bit confused, so to speak, right? And therefore we don't like it. So this is the concept of death and emptiness lines. Now, again, don't worry too much if you are sleeping towards a death and emptiness line, or if your desk, I mean, the desk is easy to shift, yeah, or you just turn around a little bit, and if it's off by even just 0.5 degrees, that's fine, you've solved the problem. So we're really only talking about building facing, house facing, not necessarily door facing, desk facing, stove facing, bed facing, none of these things. This is building facing only. All right. So hopefully this clarified the concept of death and emptiness a little bit. Again, I apologize. This was a little bit of a more advanced topic, but I do get questions every now and then about what this actually means. And it does sound a little bit scary, but I hope I've alleviated some of these fears. All right. So hopefully this helped you guys, especially those who are on their Feng Shui journey. If you have any comments, any questions, please put them in the comment section below. And of course, I'm always available as well by email. My email address is in the description to the video. If you would like to contact me for either a Feng Shui course, private tutoring, or a Feng Shui audit, I'll be available. And in the meantime, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with anybody who may be interested, and please subscribe to my channel. See you guys soon. Take care.